Dude,
Frutiger Arrow?
retro technology? iPod? Imagine calling the OG Aqua Frutiger Arrow. Actually wild. Now, in case you don't know, Aqua was introduced with macOS 10 in the year 2000. Windows Vista, which is where the Arrow name comes from, was released in 2007. So I guess you could say Apple was just ever so slightly ahead. A whole 7 years. But the point of today's video is not just to talk about Arrow and Aqua and like the 2000s to 2010s design era. I kind of wanted to talk about how like why is modern slop still a thing, but instead of just focusing on slop itself because it's slop, I thought more about it and I realized how nostalgia is back, right? I mean, at least for like the year 2000, 90s, early Y2K, whatever. It's back. This entire setup here, I mean, this is like peak Y2K translucent design, right? With the matching Power Mac on the floor here, as well as all of these clear translucent design plastics and everything about this. It's like peak Y2K, right? But oftentimes, whenever I see like living in the 2000s or nostalgic, whatever type of videos like this, it's always more about like standard, I guess the iPod itself is a good example, right? With the iPod here, this was made to just do one thing, at least for this model, which is to play audio, music, podcasts, whatever. So if you have like a newer iPod, obviously you can do more with it depending on the model. But typically I've seen that with these nostalgic type of videos, not only has it become kind of like, I mean, it's kind of a hobby to begin with because you're using old tech or old whatever, CDs, analog media, even just reading a magazine or something. But it's also kind of become like a lifestyle choice, and also like, I don't know, it's just like nostalgia has kind of transformed into something completely different, and making use of old technology kind of just intertwines with it. So if you want to like not use modern technology like streaming or whatever, typically like the VHS DVD side of things will also be grouped with this because it's Y2K technology, it's what was in use at the time, as well as like CRTs or even like LCD displays of the era. I mean, this is an LCD and it's from 2003. So now, to be fair, this is of course a pro desktop, so it's not exactly something that was super common at the time, but it's just interesting to see these videos and the way that, like, these videos always talk about how it was simpler back then, how it was easier to, like, everything was easier, and to a certain point, it is true. But at the same time, I mean, it was still, daily life. Just because you're using a Power Mac or a Windows PC, whether it be, Windows 98, 2000, XP, which were, like, all of those were still in use at the time. Whenever I see these videos, like, they always focus on the physical media side of things, which is a valid point because it's physical, it's media. DVDs themselves, like, even though this specific Power Mac doesn't have a DVD drive, I can still play CDs on it. I have another Power Mac off to the side which has a built-in DVD drive, but it's always something like a standalone device. Usually I don't necessarily see I'm not saying it's not something I've seen, but it's typically less common to see a retro computer in use unless you're like super focused, using old technology, working with old operating systems and things like that. There's always the argument of
it's old, it's unsupported, it's whatever.
but if you actually do some research, there's still a lot that you can do with these systems. And it's exactly why I showcase using these old machines, because I can still get some regular daily usage out of this, even though it may not be like a main system. I mean, it's no different than like using an old iPod, right? The iPod itself is also considered obsolete, but why should this be any more usable compared to a fully featured pro desktop for the time? I mean, VHS is even older than this, but it's still being used to this day because, you're nostalgia maxing or whatever. Am I nostalgia maxing? Just because I'm using these old systems, does that mean I'm part of the nostalgic Y2K whatever trend as well? I just want to use these old systems which I know work. I mean, right now we have iTunes opened up with an internet radio station and it works just fine. Like, it works completely fine. The speakers on this system are also fantastic considering it's a system from 2002. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the times with these nostalgia type videos, I guess it's more of like a curiosity and like something intriguing about the old technology that you haven't used before. Personally, I don't have any nostalgia for old macOS because I never used it at the time when it was like, the main thing. When macOS Tiger, Leopard, like all these old versions here, when they were still in use, I didn't use macOS, but I'm using it now because for me, it just makes sense. I get to use a cool operating system with some old applications, and the nice part about this is that in a way, kind of like physical media, it's stuck in the moment that it was made. So even though updates don't necessarily exist for these machines anymore, I can still use the last whatever supported version. I can use even older versions of applications and they just work. So I guess with these like nostalgic type of videos, I'm not going to say that they only focus on one side of things, but there's definitely a lot that could also be focused on as well. Everything wasn't perfect in the past either. I know that this system isn't perfect. There's a lot of features that are missing out on this because macOS has been updated since then. Same goes for Windows. But I just want to use these old systems because they work. Again, kind of like the physical media side of things. I never stopped using physical media even during like the big heyday of streaming. I guess it is still the heyday because it's the main thing. But more and more people are sharing their thoughts on going back to an iPod, using CDs. It works, it does the job. I don't really care for updates. I understand why they exist. I still understand the limitations of these machines, but in a way, it's also like its own separate time machine because instead of just using like, a retro game console and playing the games on it, you can actually use the fully featured operating system, browse old websites. I can even like open up this right here, which is actually QuickTime, if you can believe that. So yeah, this is, it's just something that you don't see anymore. But again, I don't have personal nostalgia for this era of Apple. I will say that I have some nostalgia for old iOS because I used old iOS when it was still, more of a current thing. But it still doesn't, I know what it can do, what it can't. There are ways of fixing this old technology. It is still something that you have to kind of learn more about. It's not as simple as putting a DVD in a DVD player or playing a PlayStation game where you just put in the game and it powers up. It does require a bit more work, but to me, it is worth it because the new technology isn't going to improve if everyone keeps using it, right? If you keep using it, then it shows that there's still going to be some kind of customer for that type of product. Now, I do still have modern systems, modern enough to help me get by for making videos for you guys. But if I just want to listen to music or watch something that I have physically, I'll just use that. Now, I will say that I do use streaming from time to time, most extensively YouTube, because not only am I on it, I also watch a lot of different YouTube videos, and instead of pushing an old system like this Power Mac to its limits for playing YouTube, I have newer devices which are perfectly capable for that. I know I'm going a bit all over the place here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that with these nostalgic type of videos, it's interesting. At least for me, it's also kind of hilarious to see like using this old technology for the first time because I never stopped using CDs, iPods, iPhones, whatever. And I know that's kind of its own separate thing, but even just like VHS or retro game consoles, CRT TVs, I have a lot of different retro technology, but it's not for the sake of, I just think it looks cool and I'm going to have it on a shelf. Now, in some cases, that kind of is the case if it's broken or it needs to be repaired. But in other cases, such as what you see here, just because it looks cool doesn't mean that it's useless. I think there is still a lot of, potential with these living like it's 2000s videos. The main issue just comes down to you need to put in some time and effort to make sure these systems or whatever work properly. And the other big problem is that with old technology, it is still older technology. So it's possible that it'll need repairs or whatever. I know it wasn't perfect, but has it ever been perfect? But it's kind of also turned into modern Y2K. It's like the Y2K 90s, whatever era, and kind of making it modern as well. So you're taking all of this old technology, you're mixing it with some new stuff, whether it be a new iPhone, new music, but it's still on a CD or whatever. I will say that with these nostalgia type of videos, they do tend to actually show, like, it's not just about the old technology, but it's also about going somewhere, whether it be like the mall or whatever. But it's kind of hard to do that when a lot of things just don't exist anymore. So I guess that's one advantage of old technology, is that unlike an entire building, chances are something like an iPod or a retro computer will still exist. It's also something that I do keep in mind. Like, I know people weren't just on like their screens 24/7, especially considering the internet was, using the computer back then was kind of like you have a dedicated computer room, office, whatever. And that's kind of what I've done here with this Y2K setup, as well as a matching like early 2000s PC setup off to the side. But what's so much different compared to back then, I mean, you can't even use old cell phones anymore because of the lack of network support. With the way that everything has become streaming and subscriptionified,
We're going back to the slop circle, which is exactly what I wanted to avoid.
even though it's not going to be 2002 anymore, I still try to show these cool systems off and show that they're, even though they're old, they're not obsolete. And I guess that is something that, a lot of these videos also show, is that with physical media, it still exists. You can still use it. You don't have to use a subscription service or whatever. There was just a lot more potential, and it seems like the potential was stuck in the past, because nowadays it's like, I mean, if you went back to an electronics store back then, everything was unique, and depending on what it is, it was also mainly just a one-purpose device. So again, like the iPod, or if you have like a Walkman, or I guess the computer itself would be a bit more of a multi-purpose tool. It did what it said it was going to do. A VCR is going to play VHS tapes, it's going to record onto tape. Like, that's all it does. It doesn't need to connect to the internet. It doesn't need an app or some kind of Wi-Fi connectivity, especially with like the TV side of things, whether it be CRT displays or older flat screen displays, which are also pretty common with these type of videos because they still work. Obviously, physical damage and age of the electronics is also going to be a factor, but the point is that if they do work, they are going to work because they don't need an internet connection, they don't need software updates. Why do you need a smart TV when it's just going to be worse in every way possible? And the TV side of things, like, I guess that's more of an appliance, right? But one thing that I don't typically see a lot is the actual appliances from back then. Now, just like with the retro technology, I also do like the retro appliances from back then.
Why do you need an iPad on your fridge?
I don't need that. And I'm the guy with all this awesome Apple stuff. It's hard to imagine that relatively recently you could go to a store like Sears, which was a department store that existed. I guess in some ways it does still exist, but barely. But you could go to a store like that. You could get an appliance, whether it be, there's a lot of different brands that still exist nowadays, but the quality is just, it doesn't exist anymore. That part of the business side of things is just gone, which is something that I guess it's not as easy with these nostalgia type of videos to show a refrigerator, but it's just sad to see what we had and what was lost. Screens in kitchens are not a new concept, or even just a stereo or whatever, because there were like the kitchen TV, that was its own separate market. Typically they would be smaller, like, I don't know, 13-inch television sets. Maybe they would have like a built-in VCR or DVD player, and this is also a pretty common thing with those nostalgia videos. But at least with that, you could just tune into a channel or play some kind of physical media, and that's it. And nowadays, you got to connect your smart appliances to the internet, to the cloud, to everything, unless you have some kind of older appliance that you can still rely on. And there we go. We're back to the slop topic. And I'm not trying to do this on purpose. It's just that literally every aspect of everything
has turned into slop.
And I guess that is one big appeal of these nostalgia videos, is because, the old technology still works. Can you really say the same for something new that works right now? But if it needs a server, an internet connection or even like an app on your phone. Apps used to be cool. They used to be functional, and in many cases, they would also work offline. Nowadays, it's like the complete opposite. So it is really cool to see these nostalgia type of videos of, living like back in the day. But unless modern tech is able to match the standards of old technology, which is a ridiculous concept to even think about. It's like we went from we don't sell junk, which is what Steve said, and now everything is junk, basically. It's like, what happened? Now, I know this is probably, like I said earlier, a lot of different topics into one, but I don't have any notes, or
Let alone anything AI, prompted.
the only way you can actually have a decent usable experience for anything nowadays is usually with older tech. And even though physical media does still exist, it's not like before, and even though obviously Mac and PC still exist, it's also not like before, because even if the hardware is, it's fantastic. MacBook Neo, M4 Mac Mini, those are really cool machines. But when all the software relies on, again, an internet connection, a subscription, or whatever, is it going to be as usable as this 20-year-old Power Mac? Honestly, I don't know. The Intel era of Mac systems might be seen as completely like,
Why would you use that e-waste?
this is the generation before the Intel systems. If I wanted to, I can install Photoshop, other professional apps on this, and it's still going to work fine. Same goes for the Intel era. I just want to have usable hardware that is both awesome to use and it does the job. And that's exactly why I have a ton of different Mac and PCs, because they just work. The software works, the hardware looks really cool. I mean, you could go back, like, you could go to the store and you can buy this monitor. Where are you going to find a monitor with translucent plastics like this nowadays? It's like, it's all just the same old flat panel, whatever, and even though they technically have better specifications, better backlighting, higher resolutions, higher refresh rates, I mean, this one still works. It still powers up. It still has a fantastic picture. Quality control has kind of gone out the window, for a long time now, so I don't know if the new monitors are going to last as long. It's entirely possible. I'm not saying they aren't, but pretty much everything just isn't the same anymore. And nostalgia videos try to capture that time again. Social media is also a topic that is typically discussed within these nostalgia videos because, well, I mean, the whole point of these challenges or whatever is to also try and decrease your screen time usage, which does make sense because they also didn't exist back then. I mean, I will spend some time on YouTube, but I also spend an equal amount of screen time on these older systems directly, because one advantage of this older technology is that I can't just open up like the browser and watch YouTube on this, because the system itself is just like, it's too demanding for this PowerPC G4. Now, I do have slightly newer systems which can easily multitask and have YouTube as well as old macOS and other applications. But again, I'm not just going to spend all my time on just one specific thing. I see that it's just going to be a waste of time. I mean, I barely have enough time to make even more content for you guys, so I'm not going to try and waste it on something that isn't going to provide any value. The reason why I typically watch YouTube more often is because a lot of the times there's a lot of helpful content out there for old Macs, old software, old whatever, and it also helps me learn more about the systems that I have. But because I directly never stopped using technologies like the iPod, I've never really dealt with streaming or all that nonsense. If I want to find something new, I'll just use YouTube for discovery, but otherwise I'll use iTunes. It's all on my system. I don't have advertisements. I don't need a subscription, any of that nonsense. Honestly, I don't really know how to wrap this video up because, like I said, I don't have anything written down. I just had some thoughts I wanted to share. But I know that with these nostalgia videos, they're not going to be perfect. Obviously, some minor details are probably going to be lost to time unless you actually experienced that era or you've done more research on it. But ultimately, I think that the nostalgia videos, the whole point is to just have fun, right? Using old technology and things like that. We had all of this awesome technology and we basically just pushed it off to the side for supposedly the convenience of an online-only internet streaming technology world. And again, it goes back to the slop circle. So it is kind of sad to see what we've lost. but at least we can still continue using this old tech. And even though I said it may not always be 100% period accurate, honestly, who cares? I know I'm not perfect either because, for example, my 90s setup, even though, it is from the 90s, some parts are actually from like the early 90s, other from the late 90s, and even some parts from the 2000s. It's kind of a different combination, but who cares? If you enjoyed today's discussion about old technology, then consider leaving this video a thumbs up. And if you want to see even more awesome content about actually using old technology, then just check out the channel. If you guys have any comments, then leave them down below. I'm interested to hear in what you guys have to say about this. And again, ultimately, using old technology, the whole point of it is to have fun and see what you can actually do with it. But that's it for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.